All right, let's talk about something we've all heard a million times: save for a rainy day. But what if that's only half the story? What if it's not the best advice? Today, we're digging into a grandfather's lesson about wealth that pretty much flips that common wisdom on its head.
So get this, a grandfather sits his grandson down and says, never save money. I mean, just let that sink in. My first thought, and probably yours too, is that sounds completely wrong, right? Every single person, from our parents to the so-called experts, tells us to save, save, save. So you have to wonder, what on earth did this grandfather know that we don't?
Okay, so to really get where this wild advice comes from, we gotta go back in time, back to his early days in a small village. And here's the thing, he didn't start out as some hard worker. Nope, he started out as a dreamer.
And I mean, this guy was full of big ideas, but let's be honest, zero action to back them up. You could find him pretty much every day, just chilling under a big tree, dreaming of opening a shop, buying a herd of cows, you name it. He was always saying, one day, I'm gonna be rich. But that one day, yeah, it just never came. And while he was dreaming, his family was really struggling.
But his wife, well, she was the voice of reason in all this. She'd say to him, gently, dreams are beautiful, but they can't fill your stomach. She saw this huge growing gap between his big dreams and the empty plates on their table. And that tension, it was about to boil over.
The real turning point, the moment that changed absolutely everything, came one night. His grandson, who was hungry, just asked this simple question, "Grandpa, is there any bread?" And when his wife opened the cupboard, it was bone dry, empty. And in that one moment, it hit him like a ton of bricks. He finally got it. Dreams, as wonderful as they are, couldn't feed his family.
So, yeah, that painful moment was the kick he needed. It pushed him out from under that tree and into a life of, well, action. He was desperate, looking for any solution, any secret to feeling secure. And he thought he found it in something we all know, the simple idea of saving money.
And talk about a complete 180. He went from dreaming under a shady tree to back-breaking work as a laborer out in the hot sun. I mean, his hands got rough, his back was always aching. Every single night, he'd drag himself home totally exhausted with just a couple of coins. But the problem was, the money went out just as fast as it came in. The roof still leaked, the family was still hungry.
Then one day, he's at the village store, and he overhears someone say, "The secret is saving money. When you save, you are safe." And that little phrase, it just latched onto his brain. It sounded so simple, right? So secure. And he thought, this is it. This is the answer. This is how I'm gonna save my family.
So what'd he do? He found an old glass jar, hid it under the bed, and started his mission. Every week, a few more coins. Clink, clink. That little sound, that became the sound of hope in their house. He even told his grandson, "This jar, this is our tomorrow." But man, this saving thing came at a huge cost. They wore old, patched up clothes, they ate less, plates were often half empty. It took a whole year of this kind of sacrifice, but finally, the jar was full, and he felt so proud. He felt safe. He felt like he was finally ready for whatever came next.
All right, so picture this. He's got his jar of savings, his tomorrow, clutched tight in his hand. He walks to the market feeling on top of the world, totally confident that he's finally secured his family's future. But he was about to get a very harsh lesson about how money actually works.
I mean, think about it. He had sacrificed so much for this one moment. A full year of his life, of sweat and hunger, was poured into that single glass jar. So, was this really it? Was this going to be the answer to all their problems?
So he walks right up to the shopkeeper, puts all that money on the counter, and proudly asks for 3 big sacks of corn. But the shopkeeper just counts it and shakes his head. "Sorry," he says, "prices went up. This money, it'll only get you 1.5 sacks now." And just like that, in a single instant, all that hope just shattered. Poof! Half of the value he'd worked so hard to save had just vanished into thin air.
He was absolutely devastated. I mean, you can imagine, right? He thought he'd done everything right. He followed the advice. He worked his fingers to the bone, saved every single coin he could. But here's the kicker. While his money sat there static in a jar, the world outside kept moving. And he had this brutal realization. Saving money was like being in a slow race against a much faster opponent called inflation.
But you know what? This failure wasn't the end of his story. Not even close. In fact, you could say it was the beginning of his real education about money. That crushing defeat sparked a total shift in how he thought, away from just passively hoarding money and towards actively using it.
So, he's sitting outside his house, feeling completely defeated, and he's just watching his neighbors. One person walks by with a basket of eggs, another with fresh milk, and they looked peaceful. They didn't look worried. And then, a little idea starts to form. Not some big pie-in-the-sky dream like before, but a small, practical question. He turns to his grandson and just asks, "What if we buy some chickens?" And this time, he didn't wait, he acted immediately. He took what little money he had left from the corn and bought a few chickens. And with that, his whole philosophy changed. See, it wasn't about saving money anymore. It was about turning that money into a living, breathing, growing engine. The chickens, they were an asset. They produced something of value, eggs. They could eat some of the eggs to survive and sell the rest to buy, you guessed it, more chickens. It was a cycle of growth.
So what happened? What was the result of switching from saving coins in a jar to growing chickens in the yard? Well, let's take a look at the incredible results, because this new strategy teaches a really powerful lesson for all of us.
You know, it started small. First 1 egg a day, then 2. But pretty soon they had enough eggs to eat and some left over to sell. They used that money to buy more chickens. Before they knew it, neighbors were stopping by, becoming regular customers. The money started to grow, and the house, which had felt so empty, was now full of hope. And for the very first time, that old man felt a real deep pride. He wasn't just dreaming anymore, he was actually building his future.
And one day, he's holding an egg in his hand and he looks at his grandson and he shares the most important lesson he'd ever learned. He said, "This egg, this is more powerful than a whole jar full of money." And think about it. A jar of money just sits there. It's static. As he found out, it can even lose its value. But an egg represents life. It represents production. It holds the potential for almost endless growth. So let's just break it down one last time, this final comparison. On one hand, you have the jar. That's the saving, or maybe even hoarding mindset. It's static, it's finite, and over time it loses its power. But then you have the chicken. That's the growth mindset. It's all about using what you have. It's dynamic, it's alive, and it actually creates more value than what you started with.
And that brings us right back to the beginning. The grandfather's hard-won wisdom, the reason he said never save money, is this. Just saving money is like trying to hold water in your cupped hands. No matter how tight you squeeze, it slowly slips away. The real secret to financial security isn't just to save money, it's to make your money grow.
So that leaves us all with a really important question to think about. We all have a jar in our lives, something we're trying to fill up. But this story challenges us to look for our chicken. So ask yourself, what's the chicken in your life? What is that small, productive asset, that skill, that idea, that side project that you can start growing today? It really doesn't have to be big.